So in working with a lot of people and getting varying types of personalities, and obviously with my clients I get to know them quite well, I work with them quite closely. It's not just a, here's a plan, do it. I get to know people and what makes them tick and where they're coming from and all sorts of things. And honestly, I've come to a theory, I guess you could say, and this is the exclusion and restriction theory. This is from watching people, this is from listening to clients that have come to me with these kinds of problems. And I'm going to put it out there, and hopefully you guys can see that when you start doing stupid shit in nutrition for no reason, it has damaging, long-lasting effects. So how does this start, this exclusion and restriction theory? So a lot of people who don't understand eating, they would have heard that gluten's bad for you. A lot of things, gluten-free now, this is gluten-free. They charge you double the price, you think it must be twice as healthy, but it's just not the case at all. But obviously if you don't understand it, you would probably buy into this and you would say, you know what, I've heard gluten's really bad, so I'm going to remove it from my diet. So you remove it from your diet, and what happens? You feel a little better, probably because you're cutting out a lot of processed stuff, you're cutting down on your options, you maybe even lose some weight because you're cutting down on a lot of foods that you would have probably eaten before. Now you're eating less calories, so of course there is an effect. No one can deny that. But the effect hasn't come from necessarily cutting out gluten, it's come from you maybe being more aware of what you eat and you maybe cutting back on calories. That is what causes improvement. But of course, as with anything, that effect's going to wear off. That effect of, okay, I've removed something from my diet, I feel so much better. Eventually, you're going to start feeling the same. But now, unfortunately, you have this system ingrained in you that for you to feel better, you must exclude and restrict. So what happens next? You think, okay, well, when I cut out gluten, I felt good. So what's next? What next is being demonized? And an easy one that people take is dairy. They might not have an intolerance to it, they might not be lactose intolerant at all, but they've heard dairy can be bad for you. So what happens next? They remove dairy from the diet. And of course, they feel a little better because they're cutting something out. They feel like they're making progress because they've removed something that they've identified as being unhealthy. And of course, there's probably going to be a little bit of weight loss because you removed, an entire subgroup of food, and you're probably going to eat less food once again because your options are restricted and you've lost weight. So of course, there's another positive effect, and you think, wow, this is amazing. And what's happening is that you're getting this mindset ingrained into you that in order for you to progress and feel better, you need to restrict and cut out options. And of course, so you've gone from gluten, you've gone from dairy, what's next? People are saying fruit, because fruit's got sugars in it. And everyone's saying sugar is bad these days. Sugar is the reason you're getting fat. So now you're cutting out fruit, you're cutting out sugar. Eventually you're restricting and cutting out so many options that you're left with fuck all. And now that's at the point where disordered eating is rife. I've got to be honest, this may be stereotypical, but majority of the time I've found it's females that, unfortunately fall into this trap, especially with the pressures of society, magazines putting out absolute garbage, and females fall into this easily. So they've cut out gluten, cut out dairy, they've cut out carbs, they've cut out sugars. What is left for them to eat? They become so restricted in what they can eat because they're convinced that these other things that they cut out made them feel bad before, and by restricting and cutting them out, they're now feeling so much better. But now, this is where major problems can occur, because this young lady, or whatever the case may be, is convinced that they can never eat these foods again. And they demonize it, they see it as negative. Eventually, with life being life, they go eat one of those foods, these foods that they have restricted before. What do you think is going to happen? There is going to be shame, there's going to be guilt, they're going to be convinced that they're going to put on fat. So what happens next? They starve themselves, or maybe they eat one thing of those negative foods and then binge on all of them because they feel like, well, I fucked up once, doesn't matter if I fuck up the rest of the day. And it creates this endless vicious cycle where someone has excluded foods through this restriction and exclusion cycle just because they believe something at the beginning, such as gluten being bad for you, and it just creates this knock-on effect. So people always ask me, why am I banging on about these things? Why am I doing this? It's because I see this all the time, where a female in particular will come to me and they say, Dave, I can't eat gluten, I can't eat dairy, please don't put any sugars in my diet. And I'm thinking like, well, why? Oh, no, I just don't like them. But they're hiding an eating disorder within all this exclusion. They don't understand that the way that they're thinking about nutrition is very flawed, and it's scary because they've convinced themselves that gluten's bad, carbs are bad, dairy is bad, sugars are bad. And it doesn't matter what else they do or what is accounted for in their total daily calorie intake, they're convinced that those things can't be eaten. Those are off limits. And of course, what happens? I get these girls coming to me, they're eating nothing. They got this kind of restriction placed on all their eating. And 6 months later, a year later of working with me, what's happened? All of a sudden, they're eating dairy, they're eating carbs every day, they're eating sweets, they're eating the glutens, they're eating everything that they feared before, and they're still in amazing shape, if not better shape. Their relationship with food is 10 times better. The relationship with themselves is 10 times better. Their performance in the gym is amazing. And I'm trying to get this through to people that there is so much horse shit in the industry because horse shit is so marketable. People want simple, and unfortunately bullshit and horse shit is very marketable. And you guys are buying into this blindly. And people want to know why I keep making these videos and keep banging on about the same things. And maybe this video won't even get much traction because it's not shiny. It's not exciting. So be very careful. Stop demonizing food. Stop cutting out food groups because you read some fucking magazine that doesn't know what it's talking about, and now you're convinced that you must do the same. You don't understand what the knock-on effect is going to be to you, and you're going to end up in a year's time with serious disordered eating. And I promise you, people don't understand how serious disordered eating is in this world and how many lives it is ruining, relationships it's ruining, body images it's ruining. So please be smart, guys. Stop buying the latest fad and start doing things with balance, with sustainability, with inclusion, and do things properly.